Ever wondered how a simple wager can turn your life upside down? Picture this: a single roll of the dice, a swift turn of a card, or a horse's stride across a finish line. It's the allure of quick fortune, the thrill of the gamble. But betting can be a two-faced creature, promising riches while holding ruin in its other hand. It's a dance with chance, a flirtation with fate. Today we delve into an enthralling tale of a man and his tryst with betting. In the heart of London lived a charismatic man named George. George was a man of simple pleasures with an infectious laugh and a twinkle in his eye. He was born and bred in the hustle and bustle of the city, where his deep-rooted love for the unusual was cultivated. A man of many talents, George was a beloved community figure, known for his knack of spinning tales that could captivate even the most cynical of hearts. However, beneath this endearing exterior, George harbored a fascination, a harmless fascination, or so he thought, with the world of betting. It began as an occasional flutter, a way to add a little spice to the humdrum of everyday life. He enjoyed the thrill, the unpredictability, that rush of adrenaline when the odds turned in his favor. It was a pastime, a hobby, nothing more. Little did he know his innocent pastime was about to take a dark turn. As George's interest in betting grew, so did his stakes. There was a curious thrill in the uncertainty, a tantalizing taste of adrenaline that George found himself increasingly drawn to. It began with small, harmless flutters, a few pounds here and there on the outcome of a football match or a horse race, but soon the frequency of these little wagers started to increase, and so did the amount he was willing to risk. Before long, George found himself betting not just on weekends, but on weekdays too, during lunch breaks, even late into the night. It was as if an invisible force was pulling him, compelling him to place one bet after another. The allure of an easy win, the intoxicating rush of a close call. It was all too enticing for George to resist. His stakes grew higher too. No longer satisfied with the small victories of his earlier bets, George started gambling larger sums of money. A 50 here, 100 there, soon ballooned into hundreds, then thousands of pounds. The thrill of the gamble had morphed into a reckless pursuit of victory, of trying to recapture that initial high of a win. But with increased stakes came increased losses. The more George bet, the more he lost. The wins became fewer and farther between, the losses more frequent and devastating. George was caught in a whirlwind of addiction, a downward spiral that was quickly spiraling out of control. His life became a series of highs and lows, a roller coaster ride of emotions driven by the outcomes of his bets. The joy of a win was quickly replaced by the despair of a loss, the anticipation of the next gamble, the only thing keeping him going. Friends and family watched helplessly as George slipped further and further into the clutches of his addiction, his life consumed by the relentless pursuit of that elusive win. But George was too far gone to heed their warnings, too entranced by the siren song of the gamble to see the danger he was in. In the blink of an eye, George found himself in a vortex of high stakes and enormous losses. His life was no longer his own, but a slave to the roll of the dice, the turn of a card, the gallop of a horse. The downward spiral had taken hold, and George was spiraling fast. George, desperate to turn his luck, decided to place a bet that could change everything. Our man George, you see, had hit the bottom of the barrel. But rather than wallow in self-pity, he decided to do something drastic. He was going to put everything on the line: his house, his car, his grandmother's antique silverware, even his prized collection of rare comic books. The stakes were high, and the risk was enormous. But George was a man on the edge, a man who had nothing left to lose. He was going to place a bet, a massive bet, a bet so large that it would either make him or break him. And so George walked into the betting shop, a man on a mission. The air was thick with anticipation. You could cut it with a knife. He placed his bet, a bet that was larger than any he had ever placed before. There was no turning back now. As he handed over his stake to the bookie, his hands were shaking, his heart was pounding. He felt a sense of dread, but also a sense of exhilaration. This was it, the moment of truth. The room fell silent as he watched the race, his eyes never leaving the screen. His horse was in the lead, then second place, then back in the lead. It was a roller coaster ride of emotions, a whirlwind of hopes and fears. As the race drew to a close, George could feel his heart in his throat. He was on the edge of his seat, his palms sweaty, his breath ragged. He could almost taste the victory, the sweet taste of success. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. His horse stumbled, lost its footing, and fell to the back of the pack. George could hardly believe his eyes. It was like a punch to the gut, a blow that left him winded. With bated breath, George waited for the outcome. The day of reckoning had arrived. Our beloved George, the man who had dared to dance with Lady Luck, was now standing on the precipice of his destiny. The stakes were sky high, the tension palpable, his heart pounded like a drum, echoing the rhythm of his fate. His big bet, the one that had consumed him, was about to unveil its outcome. The moment was here. The dice rolled, the roulette spun, and the cards were dealt. It was as if time had stood still, holding its breath along with George. Then, like a thunderbolt, it struck. The result was out. George's face, usually so full of joviality and cheer, was a mask of shock. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale as a ghost. His eyes, wide with disbelief, stared blankly at the outcome. He had lost. The bet that had promised him a life of luxury had instead delivered a blow of devastating magnitude. The room spun around him. The laughter and chatter that once filled the air now seemed distant, muffled. His world, which only moments ago was filled with the vibrant colors of hope and excitement, was now painted in the bleak shades of defeat and despair. The impact of his loss was not just monetary. The whirlwind of betting had swept away more than just his savings. It had taken his peace, his joy, his security. His poor betting habits had led him to this juncture where he stood, a man broken by his own choices. His dreams of a life of wealth and comfort were shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of his predicament. The loss was not just financial. It was a loss of self-respect, a loss of dignity, a loss of trust from his loved ones. His life, once so full of promise and potential, was now a maze of regret and despair. In the end, George was left standing alone amidst the wreckage of his dreams. His journey, which started as a harmless flutter, ended in a tragic downfall. In a cruel twist of fate, George's life was left in shambles. From a man of stature and charm, George was reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. The aftermath of George's betting addiction was a sight far from pretty. His once vibrant life, brimming with laughter and camaraderie, was replaced by an eerie quiet. His days were no longer filled with friendly banter and joviality. Instead, they were consumed by the relentless pursuit of the next big win, the next thrilling bet. George, once a man admired for his charisma and wit, was now a figure of pity. His friends, who once reveled in his company, gradually distanced themselves, unable to bear witness to his relentless downfall. His home, once a haven of warmth and love, was now a monument to his failures, strewn with unpaid bills and reminders of debts. The impact on his relationships was heartbreaking. The sparkle in his wife's eyes, once filled with love and admiration, was now replaced with worry and despair. His children, who once saw him as their hero, now watched from the sidelines, their innocent faces etched with confusion and fear. His addiction wasn't just a game of numbers and odds, it was a battle of the mind, a war waged against his very sanity. His once sharp intellect was dulled by the constant strain of calculating risks and chasing losses. His mental health, once robust, was now fragile as a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. Yet amidst the wreckage of his life, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption, a chance to reclaim his lost glory. George sought help. He engaged in therapy, attended support groups, and slowly, painstakingly began the process of rebuilding his life. His journey was not easy. It was fraught with setbacks and disappointments. But each day, George fought. He fought for his wife, for his children, for the man he once was, and the man he hoped to become again. The moral of George's story is not one of loss and despair, but one of resilience and hope. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of betting addiction, of the havoc it can wreak on a person's life, relationships, and mental health. But it also serves as an inspiration, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of hope and perseverance. George's story teaches us that it's never too late to change, to seek help, to fight back against the whirlwind of addiction. Remember, a gamble is a whirlwind. Once caught, it's a long and arduous battle to break free.